Now, there are only two ways I know of where a client could lose all their money, and I mean every penny. One is that's game over anyway, and the second one is
My guest today is Mike LeGassick. Mike's started off 30 years ago when he started with Pearl Assurance. He's probably better known for having written a couple of books and with a third on the way.
I have had clients come into me in the past and they've said things on the lines of, oh, mate, I read, I saw, I watched. And I'll normally come back and I'll say, well, it's funny, that guy's been writing that article for 28 years in the paper. Why isn't he retired on a beach in the Bahamas off his brilliance, insight and conviction?
Why are we inherently bad at investing as humans?
If basics of investing in financial planning and compounding were taught at schools, these are the pluses and the outcomes that you would get. So it's win, 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 win. They probably don't want you to know it.
What advice would you give young financial planners now?
It might be a bit controversial what I'm about to say, but I'm going to say it anyway.
Let's launch right into it. Mike, thanks for joining me. You've come away, haven't you?
Yeah, up from Cornwall this morning. It's thanks for being invited on the show. It's great to share some insights and have a chat with you.
No, thank you again. Really appreciate it. So let's get into it then. How did you start in the profession?
Started in the profession by falling into it, which is like your podcast, to be honest with you. So I used to play snooker a lot in the social leagues, and there was a friend of mine who was working as a sales manager for Pearl Assurance, who I knew quite well, and he said, are you fed up with retail? Because I was in electrical retail from when I really left school. And he said, look, you talk to people, you get on well, do you fancy a different job in sort of financial services? And I didn't really particularly like working Saturdays and Sundays and bank holidays and Boxing Day, so I thought, well, I could do with a change. And then I got into Pearl Assurance. Those days you passed an aptitude test. I managed to get through that somehow. And from that point on, they said that the rest is history. I worked for a bank, Lloyd's TSB, a few other large insurance companies. And then lastly, for the last 24 years, I've been an independent financial advisor. And with Manning Company, say for 12 years, independent advice based in Plymouth. And I became a director about 7 years ago.
Brilliant. So tell me, let's get into the book then, because there's so much to talk about here. And as I said to you on the phone, there's so much to talk about. So why are we inherently bad then at investing as humans?
Well, advisor to the advisors, a guy called Nick Murray in the United States, who is a titan in any financial advisor in the UK, has probably heard of Nick Murray. He's been advising advisors for years, and I subscribe to a lot of his material. And he basically coined the phrase that human nature is a failed investor. And he is absolutely right. Humans aren't hardwired to be good investors. It's just not in our DNA. We just make mistakes and do the wrong thing at the wrong time for the wrong reasons. And because we're very much emotionally driven, unfortunately, particularly when it comes to investing, often logic goes out the window. So emotions take over logic. So one of the reasons I wrote the book was to try and share the information I've learned over 30 odd years and to try and give something back to the profession and hopefully help clients become better advisors and not make the mistakes that most people do.
You know what, when I read it, genuinely, I was thinking to myself, I wish I'd read this when I was 18. Because I mean, I think you say that the best time to start investing is, if it wasn't 20 years ago, then it's now. And yeah, there was a lot that rang true with what I was reading there. I'm just interested to know, just with financial planners in general, do you think financial planners can be better with their clients, and how can they be better with their clients and educate them better?
Yeah, I think the industry is striving to do that. We're one of the most regulated industries in the world, financial services, and in the UK we are very heavily regulated. And there's a big sort of push towards further development on the softer side of the business. So look, when you go and see a doctor, you don't ask to check their credentials. You assume they know what they're talking about. Same with advisors. They've normally been recommended to us. They assume that you are qualified to discuss these matters. But it's the other side of the business, on the softer side. That's showing empathy, listening to clients, finding what the grit in their shoe is, trying to find what their why is and what they want to do and get to those points. So it's the emotional touch points and not necessarily the hard facts and to be blunt, the boring stuff like this is a pension, this is what you need. That comes at the very end of the meeting, and when we meet clients, sometimes it doesn't come to that at all. It's a discussion. They find out they're good to go, or they don't need much help. They just need to steer in the right direction. But yeah, it's the emotional touch points in getting to what's driving their decisions and their behaviours to try and get them the best outcomes.
Yeah, I think in the book you were saying there that a lot of the time advisors tend to focus on what it is that you what the end goal is, as opposed to what you actually want out of it, if that kind of makes sense. And that's kind of almost backwards, if that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, if if you're getting on a long journey in your car, you use the sat nav, you need to put your destination in first, and then it meanders around and takes you through all the roadblocks. So with financial services, clients will have human roadblocks. Things go wrong, people lose people change perspective, their thought processes change, their circumstances change. So with like a financial goal, if you knew you needed X amount of money so many years down the line, you start with what the requirement is at the beginning, and then you work backwards on trying to find the plan that meets that client's criteria and what they want to achieve.
Just one thing from my own perspective as well. If we're looking at, so you in the book, it gets really drummed in that essentially index linked funds are the best way to go, basically, or the tracker funds, essentially, the really low cost ones.
Yeah, look, the argument will rage on about active versus passive, and we wouldn't have enough time to debate that. And there's as many good arguments you'll hear on the people that are proactive. Personally, I am a passive investor for clients. I invest myself passively. In a nutshell, this is the reasons behind my rationale. I tell all my clients there are only two things that they have any control over. Only two. The only two things they have any control over is the fees they pay, and passive investing, globally diversified portfolios at very low cost is one thing they can control. They don't have to pay over the top for that type of investment. And their investor behavior, how they react to the news and the media. Those are the only two things that individual investors have any control over. Everything else is out of their control. The economy, who's president, who's prime minister, the markets don't really care over the long term. So once a client understands they can only try to control the controllables and let go of what's out of their control, they normally have a better financial journey.
What do you think someone should, what should they be paying in terms of annual management charges, roughly speaking?
In my opinion, I can only speak for my own clients. So basically, my clients pay around about 0.35% per annum to have their money invested. So a third of 1%.
Okay.
And that is, we believe, extremely competitive. It's a funny thing about investing. We live in a world, and we're brought up in a world where it's a common phrase where people say, well, you get what you pay for. But investing is an anomaly. It's one of those rare things where you get what you don't pay for. So let me just explain what I mean by that. You don't have to overpay to get the returns that the market has historically produced for the patient long-term investor. You don't have to bust a gut and pay silly fees for that. The market has done quite well on its own, providing you in a very globally diversified portfolio. You never invest any amount of money in one area that could make or break you. So diversification is key. But why pay more with no guarantee of better performance? That's my point.
No, I totally agree. Just out of interest, how often does it happen where a client calls you up and says to you, Mike, I'm really worried. This has just happened. It's different this time. I need to pull all my money out. I'm just interested to know how often it happens. Hand
on heart, COVID was the acid test. So I send my clients every single month. I used to write a regular newsletter every month. I've done it for about 6 years. I now do video podcasts, and I do a radio podcast local on Radio X in Devon. But I send no video blogs. I never talk about the market because it's out of my control, and it's what was news today is old news tomorrow. I try to focus on the things they can control and keeping them on the straight and narrow. Now, you may remember years ago when Mike Tyson was 21 years old, he was knocking everybody out. And he came out with a fantastic saying, which is what I impart to clients. And he basically said, everyone's got a plan until they get punched in the mouth. So I send what I call my clients, the newsletter and the video blog, I call it a regular shot of sanity serum. Because the human body can't absorb vitamin D, so it needs constant exposure to it all the time. So basically, we have to keep putting that out there to clients, keeping them on the straight and narrow to make sure they don't do the wrong thing at the wrong time for the wrong reason that they'll live to regret. COVID came, that was the acid test. If anyone was going to stop the bleeding, please get me out of here, that was the time. Hand on heart, I didn't have one client, which I am immensely proud about, I will add, I didn't have one client that rang up in full panic mode. I had a few that needed an arm wrapped around them and to re-educate them and remind them of these things happen, but they never disinvested, they didn't go into cash, they're all in it for the long run. And I have to remind clients, you're not invested just up to retirement, you're invested up to and throughout retirement. So for most people, that's multi-decades. And if you look at the long-term performance of what the markets have done over decades, it's been a pretty good place to be, providing you stay in your seat and don't panic. And I'm really pleased that the regular newsletters, the education, the video blogs, it must have sunk in because I didn't have anyone that panicked. I will add, had I had someone who did everything against my advice when their plans hadn't changed, their timescale hadn't changed, their views hadn't changed, I probably would have had to respectively disengage because I would have been of no use to them at all. They're paying an ongoing servicing fee for me to look after them, but if they're going to do everything that I tell them not to do, they're wasting their money. And I'm glad and pleased to say that that never happened.
I guess it's kind of you're being there to be that guide, really, aren't you? It's not just about implementing everything, it's about being the guide when the tough times come.
It's like being an oak door between them and a big mistake. You can call it a human insurance policy, and many advisors use that terminology. You can sort of relate to that. I spend about 70% of my time managing client behaviour, and I enjoy it because, in all honesty, I think it's the biggest part of the job. The mundane bits and pieces is you need this, you need that, this is why we're doing this does this for you, this does that for you, here's your financial journey. It's bread and butter stuff for most advisors, but it's just making sure that they don't go off piste and do the wrong thing by getting sidestepped by normally the media. I mean, the media gives headlines that are scaremongering headlines with no context, and that is a really dangerous thing. And I think, borderline negligence, it causes panic. Because whenever you hear the bad news, all you hear is the bad news, but there's never any context behind it. If they gave context, clients wouldn't make the mistakes they often make.
No, I agree. It was interesting because I read the book, and then last night I was watching the news, and there was a lady on from The Observer, The Guardian, I think, and I think The Observer's having a few issues. Mm. And she was just talking about troubling times ahead, and I thought, I don't know.
Well, a broken clock is right twice a day, isn't it? Okay?
Yeah.
Right. So I have had clients come into me in the past, and it'll probably happen again, and they've said things on the lines of, oh, mate, I read, I saw, I watched. And I'll normally come back and I'll say, well, it's funny, that guy's been writing that article for 28 years in the paper. Why isn't he retired on a beach in the Bahamas off his brilliance, insight and conviction? They're still writing articles. They don't know really any more than you and I. They're forming an opinion. And they are paid to capture your eyes. They want, it's clickbait. They want, why let the facts get in the way of a good news story, was the old adage. They want you to respond to that information, like the marketing is. It's all geared towards, largely from the media, it's scaremongering, and I don't agree with it, and it doesn't help anybody.
Yeah, and I think there was a really, I think I told you as well when we were on the phone, there was a quote that came up that was something like, I think the economists have successfully predicted the last 20 out of 2 recessions or something like
Absolutely
that.
Right.
It just seems to happen all the time. I'm interested about financial planning education now, because it seems to me like there is a fundamental lack of it in the UK in general, and I think that, I just think most people just don't have any idea really, and they don't really learn until they start getting to sort of, I would probably say about my kind of age, they start to know a little bit about it around about the age of 35. Why do you think this is? And I'm just curious as to, because you would think that investing in that would be good for things long term.
Right. It might be a bit controversial what I'm about to say, but I'm going to say it anyway because I've got to have the courage of my convictions.
Oh, that's why I asked the question.
Right. So here's my opinion. I've thought about this a great deal. I have got a life, by the way, outside of financial services, but I do think on these things at times. So Number one, I think it's shameful that there isn't basic financial education in schools. So, you speak to kids, and I've spoken to many schools and universities in Plymouth, and a lot of them don't know how a credit card works, how a debit card works, no idea about a current account, how a mortgage works, and then they're thrown out there into the workplace in what's difficult times and austere times, and they don't really know where to go or what to do, and that just instills panic. So I'm a firm believer that, in all honesty, I think it should form part of the school curriculum, basic financial understanding and concepts. There are a number of concepts I wish I'd grasped or remembered being taught, but I honestly don't. Things like the power of compounding, how things work in that regard. There is a severe lack of education in the UK. There's a report done recently. I can't remember this, but I think it might have been Lloyd's Bank. I might be wrong. And they said the level of financial illiteracy in the UK is extremely high compared to other countries. And it's because it's not dealt with. And the controversial thing I shall say is this. Here's my thinking. If financial planning and the basics of investing in financial planning and compounding were taught at schools, these are the pluses and the outcomes that you would get. You would get transparency, you would get clients and investments managed honestly and openly with no surprises, because no one likes a nasty surprise. You would get far better client outcomes. You would get less reliance on the state and later in life, and far few complaints to the Financial Conduct Authority. So it's win, 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 win. And yet it's not being taught. For what it's worth, I just tend to think that the powers that be want a largely conformed society and compliant society. They probably don't want you to know it, because I can't think of a rational reason why this is not taught in schools to help people be financially better educated and nurture better outcomes. No other reason makes sense to me.
I agree. I think there might be something a bit larger in it. I mean, it's, if you look, I always again, when we had that conversation, I was thinking of I don't know why I thought about this, but I was thinking of the film Wall Street, and I was thinking of all the meetings that they had with the owners of the business, and then Gordon Gekko's up there being Gordon Gekko, but all these people are really proud to be owners of those of that business, and they take a vested interest in it. And I just don't think we have that in the UK. I don't think that's something. And again, going back to your book, I thought that one thing that I really thought was a really powerful way of sort of explaining this was that you look at your bank statement. Where does it go? I mean, I'm looking at mine, and I've got Coventry Building Society for the mortgage. I've got British Gas. I've got Sky. Got all of those companies, and then you also said, well, think about what you do in an average day and where you go and spend your money, and then think about that, and then think about having a little bit of a slice of that pie. And so you go, what do you do in an average day? You might go to Boots for lunch, buy a meal deal, something like that, and then on the way back you'll go and stop off at Tesco, multinational company now, doing pretty well by all accounts. And it was. Yeah, I don't know. It was just. I just don't think that we have that really here.
Well, that's a basic fundamental misunderstanding of what the stock market is. I mean, the example I always give is, imagine I'm in a pub having a drink, and someone comes up to me who's a friend of a friend, and they say, "Oh, Mike, you're in this line of work. If it's not too big a question, do you mind telling me how you invest your money?" I could answer that question one of two ways. The first way I could answer is, "Oh, I invest in the stock market," and just have a sip of my beer, and they'll look at me and go, "Well, that's risky, isn't it?" Or I could answer it a second way, and I could say, I invest cost effectively over the long term in some of the greatest businesses in the world, the type of companies and businesses that you and I and everyone we've ever known use every day of our lives, and that we can't function without. Oh, that sounds pretty decent. That sounds reasonable. But that's the same thing. That is the stock market. We're in London. Take a walk down Oxford Circus and you're surrounded by the stock market. It's companies and organisations selling real things to real people and providing services 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, globally. That is what the stock market is, but the terminology scares a lot of people, particularly if you're never invested before. But the reality is owning small pieces of the greatest businesses. And most people, without thinking about it, probably engage with about 20 of those companies every day of their lives, and they never think about it. Utilities, gas, Sky, fuel, Costa, shopping, airlines, hotels, retailers, farmers. We're lining their pockets every day of our lives. So I wouldn't mind owning a piece of that.
Yeah, It's a very good way of putting it. There was I think this kind of there was a bit in there as well that again there was a lot that I liked in the book. But the framing of questions, I think, is probably one way to do it, and I think probably one thing that would be a take home for financial planners maybe is the framing of things, because you said in the book that there was, if you say to somebody, do you reckon you could save 20% of your income, then they'd be like, oh, I don't know, that might be it might be a bit risky. But then frame it a different way and go and say, do you think you could live comfortably on 80% of your income? Completely different way of doing it, and it makes somebody think about it and think to themselves, well, actually there's a lot of benefits out of doing this, and the small amounts really do add up as well over a period of time. I wanted to just ask a question just on just what you think. I've got two young children. I've got one that's one that's three. They're, you know, by all accounts, I'm trying to educate them a little bit more than I was. Ironically, I'm going to have to edit this bit out, but my father is a financial planner, so I feel like I should have known, but I didn't. For them, let's just say that they've got a blank sheet of paper. My son's got a junior ISA, which I'm putting 50 quid into every single month, just purely to show him what can be done. And so far actually it looks pretty good. Given if it was just to be in cash, it would have amounted to barely anything, and it's gone up for a fair amount. But this is very short term. We're talking about the long term here. But if you were to make a blueprint for how you could get somebody to live their life, so then they could be, let's just say, financially very comfortable by the time that they retire, and somebody that's on an average kind of wage, what would they need to do in order to facilitate that?
Okay, there's a couple of points to that question. First off, I'll address young children. So if I was advising kids, you know, parents for the kids now, and they said, look, I want to invest something to give the kids a sort of leg up, an early start, and, you know, one's 1 and one's 3, they're probably not going to be accessing that money until they're probably at least 17, 18, 20 perhaps. Now, historically, that's a long time to invest in the stock market, the great businesses of the world. That is deemed long term. So most people, if you did a poll through the UK, people that have got private pensions or investment ISAs, they won't know this, but advisors will know this. By and large, the most common portfolio, which is normally by default, is what they call a 60-40 split. This is historically the way it's been. 60% in owning great businesses, that's the stock market. 40% lending to great businesses, which are known as corporate bonds or government bonds. So let's just take it back a step, because there's some maths behind this. We can only go on the past as our guide. No one knows what's going to happen in the future. So you can only look at the long-term history to get a reasonable picture. So clients often ask me, well, how have these two performed and how have they returned? Now, the global stock market has, on average, for the last sort of 100 years, made a return of around about 10% a year. That's the average return. It would be great if it did it every year. It'd be very nice and convenient, but it doesn't. Sometimes it's fallen dramatically, and sometimes it's gone up significantly. And that is the way the markets have always worked and will continue to. But the long-term average, if you put a straight line through it, is about 10%. Lending to businesses has been about 5 or 6. But the kicker is inflation. So inflation in the UK and England for the last, God knows how many years, it's been around about 3%, something on those lines. So we have some basic maths. So if I own pieces of great businesses, they've done about 10, less 3% inflation, my money's grown by 7. Lending to businesses, bonds and corporate bonds have made 5 or 6, less 3%, I've made 2 or 3. So there's a significant difference there in growth. There's a trade-off though. And the trade-off is that investor must be able to stomach with greater volatility, because the more money you have in the areas that have historically produced the best returns, the stock market, great businesses, the more volatility you're going to get. But you don't get the returns without the volatility. So time is key. Time is a friend of the long-term investor. Patience and time and a good temperament. So if you're investing for a 20-year timeline, if it was me, I would be 100% in owning great businesses. We'd be having a whole different conversation if you said this is a 2, 3, 5 year plan. because then there's an emphasis on security. But if you know you're going to be in it for the long term, decades, then historically those are where the best returns come from. And a lot of people aren't aware of this. They don't know what they're invested in. It's funny you mentioned earlier, you look at your bank statement. And the amount of conversations I've had with clients, and they get legacy plans out, and I say, well, who's your pension with? Oh, Royal somebody. Where's your mortgage? Oh, I think is it Skipton? A lot of people don't even know where their main investments and debts are going to. And it might sound crazy, but we live in a really helter-skelter busy life these days. Time moves at 1,000,000 miles an hour, and people forget sometimes the fundamentals of where they are. So, and you've moved that forward to more involved investment planning, and it takes on a whole degree of higher importance. So a blueprint would be, always pay yourself, in my opinion, before. Pay yourself first. You're the one who's working. You're the one who's putting the shift in. So you have some me time, money from, I want to get something from my rewards and my efforts and my fruits of my labour. And then invest as much as you comfortably can without compromising your standard of living. I'm a strong believer in keeping one eye on your future, but never both. That's dangerous. That's hedging all your bets for getting to 60 or 70 and hoping you're going to have a good retirement. Because as Ferris Bueller famously said, life moves pretty fast. If you don't look around once in a while, you could miss it. So I'm a strong advocate of you got to live for today as well.
Well, yeah, I mean, the thing is, we never know what's going to happen, do we?
Not at all.
You mentioned when we were speaking earlier on LinkedIn about the attitude to risk questionnaire and just the fact that it wasn't something that you really wanted. Well, you didn't really place much emphasis on it initially. Just tell me about that.
Right. So the FCA rules on know your customer, know your client, which is important. So we've got to be able to evidence to our regulator that we have an understanding of someone's capacity for risk. But people often get risk and volatility mixed up. They're not the same thing. Volatility may suggest there is a presence of risk, but it's not risk in itself. And this is a misunderstanding, a disconnect. So when we talk about things like attitude to risk, imagine a client comes into me that's never invested before and they've inherited money. I am not comfortable whatsoever on sending them a remote attitude to risk questionnaire to fill in. Because unless I've given them a brief market history and tested their level of knowledge and their understanding, they could be answering those questionnaires completely wrong from misinformation. If your perception of risk is in a globally low-cost diversified portfolio for the long term, that you could lose all your money at the drop of a hat, that's probably unrealistic, and you're bound to take a conservative attitude to that. You will answer questions very conservatively, which could ultimately undo you and not be the right thing for you for your plans in the future. So I developed a qualifying question that I ask all clients, and it tells me right off the bat whether they're on the right page or they have massive, what I call M&Ms. So clients come in with me and I have to unravel a suitcase full of M&Ms, which are not the chocolates. It's myths, misconceptions and misunderstandings. So I need to know where they are and their level of understanding. And the question I developed was, because most people I speak to are old enough to remember this, I asked them if they know what Black Monday was in 1987. Most of them are familiar with it. And they'll say, oh, it was a big stock market crash. And I go, yes, it was. In fact, it was probably the biggest in the UK. And then I say to them, do you know what the FTSE 100 is? And they'll go, well, I've heard it, or I think I know what it is. And we qualify what that is. It's the largest 100 companies in the UK. And then I say to them, quite simply, if you had £100,000 invested in the FTSE 100, and you come on one day and you put the news on and you say, Black Monday, biggest stock market crash in UK history, how much do you think you have left of your £100,000 after you've just witnessed the biggest stock market crash in UK history? Now, I have had many people say to me, well, none, it's all gone. It's a stock market crash. Now that tells me immediately they don't have the facts. The reality was that the market fell about 22% in 48 hours. Now I'm not making light of that. That's a steep drop. It recovered relatively quickly and it's way past where we are now than it was then. No, but if that's their understanding of what a stock market crash is, and then I go, oh, fill this attitude to risk questionnaire in, I think I'm pretty sure they're going to be extremely cautious on the way they answer those questions. Now, there are only two ways I know of, I can think of, where a client could lose all their money, and I mean every penny, in a globally diversified, low-cost investment over the long term. One is Putin pressing the red button, we enter global thermonuclear war. That's game over anyway. And the second one is a meteorite coming out of the sky and having the same effect. Because if you take those two Armageddon situations off the table, and you still believe that you could lose every penny in a low-cost, globally diversified portfolio, you're basically subscribing to a belief system that we could survive as a society, whether it's banks, retailers, farmers, gas, electric, utilities, airlines, hotels, shopping. All roads lead back to Armageddon, because all those businesses would need to go out of business permanently, and then you would lose everything. Now, when I explain that to a client in that fashion, they sort of go, well, yeah, now that you put it that way, that sort of makes sense. But they're not expected to think on those lines. It's the advisor's job to convey the realities and be truthful so they can go away, consider the conversation, and make informed decisions. But I don't want clients forming opinions and decisions on misinformation. It's negligent. And that's why a brief history of the markets, with the caveat of nobody knows what's going to happen next week, next month, and next year, gives them the information where they can then answer those questions more accurately, I would say, in my opinion.
What do you think? What are the main things that I think we're basically shaped by by things that happened to us when we were quite young, basically, yes. In terms of from money, from what I know about it, my limited knowledge of it. But what tends to be the main issues that you have with clients in terms of their perceptions of the stock market and the issues with investing? And what does this, how has this tended to be transpired on the whole?
Okay, we are the product of our environment, and there's no doubt about that. You know, well, I mean, a good question to ask clients is, what's your first recollection of money? What were you like when you were growing up? Was money easy to come by? Was it tough? Was it month to month, week to week, hand to mouth existence? Because obviously, if you come from that environment, you're normally very careful with your money. If everything's been given to you on a silver platter, it's easy come, easy go. Now, I can't tarnish everyone with the same brush, tar everyone with the same brush, but by and large, if you're used to an easy lifestyle, you tend to think it's going to stay that way. So it's a good question to find out what was your earliest recollections about money, what was it like in your household, and you might think that's a personal question, but I think if it's asked in the right way, clients generally are quite happy to say, well, actually it was tough, or we had a good life. And then it gives you an idea where they're coming from. But there's three common things that come up a lot with investing across the spectrum of investing. Now, there's a very highly regarded advisor in the UK called Andy Hart that does humans under management, a real mover and shaker and innovator in our profession. And he came up with three classic examples. I don't know whether Andy thought these up themselves, but I learned them from him, so he gets the credit for these. And here are three things that I think are great stories, great analogies that convey strong points. So I'll deal with them one at a time. So the first one is, as I said earlier, confusing risk with volatility. And the story that Andy came up with, which I think is fantastic, is imagine you're on a roller coaster. You ever been on a roller coaster?
I have, yeah.
Okay, you either love them or you hate them. You either get at the end and go right to the front, or you never do it again. But most people, when they go on a roller coaster for the first time, they strap themselves and it's quite tight, and they start going up the steep climb. And then when it starts hurtling down the other way, people are tend to be screaming, get me out of here, whatever. Then they do the loops, and people are losing their minds, saying, I'm going to die, get me out of here. Now, all this is volatility. It's the way the markets have always worked. But had you managed to have gotten yourself out of your seat upside down mid-loop the loop, you're then looking at permanent loss. So you don't get yourself out of the roller coaster when you're upside down in it mid-loop the loop. You don't get out of the market when tough times come. So I think that's a fantastic analogy. The second one, which investors tend to forget all the time or not even consider, is inflation. Inflation, I call it the silent assassin. It's relentless. Like the Terminator movie, it can't be bargained with, it can't be reasoned with, and it absolutely will not stop. That great line from the first Terminator movie, that's what I liken inflation to. And again, Annie shared these three fantastic analogies. The second one is inflation. So imagine you're going to a wedding, and you're in your finery, and you're having drinks and canapes, and then you see this magnificent ice sculpture, and everyone's looking at it. It's a stunning piece of sculpture, and you can see all the detail. You can see the swan, the feathers, everything, and it's got a big drip tray underneath it, and it's as dry as a bone. There's no water in it. And then you go to the wedding, and you come back about an hour and a half later, and then you look at the statue, and it's not quite the same as it was an hour and a half ago. You can sort of see that it's still a swan, but there's a lot of water in that tray. And that is the relentless drip, 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 the impact that inflation has on eroding your purchasing power. Because never forget, the primary objective of money, wherever you store it, is to maintain its purchasing power. So you can continue to buy the same goods and services that you're used to year after year. As long as your money keeps pace with inflation, You don't have to give anything up. You're never taking a pay cut. But people, forget inflation at your peril, because it's never going to go away. So inflation is one that clients really need to understand. Particularly people think they're getting a good rate of interest in the bank. Sometimes it's not even up to inflation. They're losing money in real terms. And the third one, which we get all the time, and with the advent of AI and crypto and things like that, is get rich quick schemes, or fads, or what's working now, as Andy says. And again, it's another fantastic example. So bear with me. I'm not losing my mind here, so bear with me. The example he gives is that it's a turkey farm. So there's a turkey on a turkey farm, and he's got a wonderful life. And the farmer feeds him every day. He's surrounded by his friends. It's comfortable, and there's no predators. He's protected, and the farmer is as regular as clockwork. And then one day, which happens to be the 24th of December, he gets a strange feeling in his gut. The farmer's late, and he's never late. What's going on here? And with that, the door flies wide open, and he sees all his friends and family being wheeled out into a truck. They're going to be someone's Christmas dinner, and that is. Basically, it was absolutely fine until it wasn't. So get rich quick schemes and these influencers on the internet saying, look at my Ferrari and my 10-bedroom, detached property that I got in 6 months. They are influencing people, and it's terrible they're doing this, because people are parting with their money, thinking they can get rich quick, and it's great until it's not great. So those three great examples that Andy uses, I can't better them. I think they're great ways of explaining three concepts that clients really need to grasp.
It's I think with the get rich quick schemes, I think that with finfluencers, it seems like they seem to be coming down. Actually, quite surprised about it. I think the FCA really, they did their job there, just cracking down on them.
It's the social media that you see it on. You see it on Facebook and all the Twitter accounts. You see it an awful lot of it, way more than I'd like to see. But it's the world we live in now. We just got to try and be mindful of it and keep a lid on it.
I think people, I think it's going to be very difficult for them to do it in the future. I think it's going to deter people, what they've done there.
And
so,
I hope so.
Yeah, I mean, they were active on it, and I was quite surprised by it, actually. You just going back to what you were saying there about, if you, I don't know exactly the way that you would phrase this, but if someone had maybe come from maybe more modest means, what does that mean in terms of the way that they, their psychology with money, and the way that you educate them to make them want to invest in the stock market?
I've never met a single person in 33 years in this business who wanted to buy a personal pension. Strange that, isn't it? But I've met hundreds of people that are very interested in future spending money. So terminology in our profession, I believe, needs to be addressed to a degree. It's not very sexy. It doesn't motivate. It doesn't inspire. You don't get someone waking up on a Saturday morning, a married couple, saying, what should we do today? Oh, should we go in town and buy a pension? Normally, people look over their shoulder and they have a sudden realization that they think they've left it too late, or they think they ought to do something now. But the cost of delay is devastating. People cannot be expected to understand how important it is to start early if you can, because the amount of money you need to put forward when you're on your 35 or 40 to catch up is an eye-watering amount. It's way more than anyone could possibly imagine, because time is the friend of the investor, and the sooner you start investing, the compounding, the snowball rolling down a hill, gathering more snow as it rolls down. The power of compounding is incredible over time. So if you're investing from when you start work, even if it's a modest amount, investing something as often as you can and keeping to it religiously through thick and thin, because don't forget, it's a crazy thing. We're talking about psychology. The stock market is the only market on planet Earth where people run out of the store when everything is on sale. It's completely illogical, but that's the way our brains work. As I said, we're not hardwired, as Nick Murray says. Human nature is a failed investor. Where else in the world, everyone loves a sale, where else in the world would you not want to buy something when it's on sale? And yet when the market falls, people tend to think, the uneducated people that invest tend to think, no, I'll wait till it goes back to normal, I'll feel better, and then I'll invest. Well, that's akin to looking at a car in a showroom that you've looked at 3 times and test-driven it once. It's £20,000, and the car showroom rings you up and says, Jamie, we know you've looked at the car 3 times, got some great news for you. We've got new stock coming in. You can have it for 16 grand. When do you want to come in and buy it? And you go, no, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll wait till it goes back to 20,000 and then I'll buy it. It's ludicrous. We wouldn't do it anywhere else. But when the market falls, people tend to stop when they should be putting as much as they can in.
So that was actually going to be my next question. So let's say COVID-19 hits, Ukraine crisis, whatever, these things, we're going to have something else that comes up in probably the next months, years, whatever. What do you say to your clients at that point?
I remind them of the plan. So plan always comes first, portfolios last, never the other way around. You really ought not to be investing for investing's sake. There's got to be a rationale behind it, what you want to achieve, retirement, whatever it may be. So plan always comes before the portfolio, always. So when it comes to disasters, and we've had plenty of them, we've had world wars, 9/11, tsunamis, horrible things that happen in the world. It's just the way the world is. And there will be others, and we've just had COVID. It's about educating people. My job is not to talk my clients down from the ledge. It's to make sure they never feel inclined to climb up onto it in the first place. Because if they are, there's a big disconnect and I'm not doing my job. Now, we're humans. We're highly emotional people. And in any walk of life, you shouldn't make big decisions when you're emotionally charged. It's never a good idea with a hot head. So when the bad times come, people are naturally going to be concerned. It's their money, it's their future. So my job is to re-educate them. Or we put in contingency plans for that the individual client's requirements, because everyone's different and unique, and then remind them that they're in this for the long term. Has your timescale changed? No. Has your plans changed? No. Has your risk profile or capacity for loss changed? No. Well, so nothing's changed. The only thing that's changed is we've had a god awful event that's just happened. You have to stick to the plan through thick and thin. And if the markets are down dramatically, and they've always been temporary because they've always come back, they always have come back to new highs, then if you've got money that you don't need for the foreseeable future, now might not be a good time to put it in because you're buying at sale prices. It's reiterating these touch points and making sure you're on the same page with the client. It's never an easy thing to do, and it's not an easy conversation to have. No one wants to be told bad news. But we live in a world where they can get a valuation every second, every day, which is crazy in my opinion because it just instills anxiety and worry. But it's managing their behaviour. If I can do that, we can weather the storm and move on. And then, look, COVID now, as far as financial markets are concerned, was a statistic on a chart. The markets are way higher than where they were before COVID came. So it shows the incredible resilience of the market and human innovation. I think it was one of the historians, Macaulay, who said, on what principle is it that when we see nothing but progress behind us, we're to expect nothing but deterioration in front of us? I don't get that. I am a half full glass person. So I'm thinking human innovation is relentless. They'll find ways to work around it. And you're investing in the great businesses of the world. You've got CEOs, FDs, and all these people running these businesses trying to maximize profits for you and I, the shareholders. We own small pieces of these great businesses. So stick to the plan, strap yourself in, and hopefully work with an advisor that can make you not feel so worried or scared and remind you of the reasons you did it for in the first place.
When there are some things that I think your philosophy is basically control the controllable ultimately here, but you do get some. I heard a lot on LinkedIn around about. So we're recording this in December of 24, but just before the budget, we got it where Rachel Reeves was coming up. There was a lot of talk about what was going to be in that budget, and then some people were taking money out of their pensions. I'm just interested to know what you do when there's a little bit of sound coming from politicians and it might actually have an impact on your clients, and what you do then. Right.
I don't time the markets. I don't time the economy. It's a very dangerous game. You're damned if you do, and you're damned if you don't. Now, I had a number of clients, we did it indeed as a practice, as all practices did, I'm sure, saying, oh, I've heard they're going to take away the 25% tax-free cash. Oh, I've heard this. Oh, I've heard that. Oh, I'm going to take all my tax-free cash out and stick it in the bank. Do you think I should do it? I told them, I don't think you should do it. Now, it wasn't because I knew what the budget was going to be, but how would I have looked if I'd said, yeah, everyone take your tax-free cash out now, and then the budget come, and they didn't touch tax-free cash? Now, there's a pension review coming up. They may change it. But I cannot, and nor will I, ever advise on what ifs and maybes. We can only advise as advisors on the status quo, legislation, rules, and inland revenue rules as we see them today. It's a dangerous game, extremely dangerous, to try and second guess what's going to happen and if buts and maybes. As I said, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. You can't win. So we tell clients, were you planning on doing this now? No. Examine the plan individually and then decide what to do. So yeah, when the budgets come, it's fever pitch. The rumours never stop. And I heard this, I've read that. My mate works in the city and he told me, and it goes on forever. But I told all my clients the same thing. And to be fair, in all honesty, they said, Mike, I sort of knew what you were going to say. I just wanted to hear it. And I said, look, I can't recommend you do this, that, and the other because this isn't happening now. I can only advise you on what we have to work with. Now, fundamentally, I think it's unfair. Changing the pensions landscape every 5 minutes, how can a client be expected to plan? Realistically, if you've got a 10 or 15 year timeline before you go into retirement, how can that person really be expected to plan to the best of their ability when a government comes in and says, all change, sorry, that's not happening now? It's unfair. And I would like to think that future governments, it's a wish, I can't see it happening, but I would like to think that they could give an amnesty or say, look, we're not going to change these particularly strong rules, these rules that everyone's aware of, for the good foreseeable future. You could plant your feet and work with that. But it's a scary world we live in when another chancellor comes in, another government comes in, and then, oh, that's gone. Now we're doing this. I feel for clients. I'm an investor. So I'm invested the same way as my clients. You know, I'm in this with them. It's not trying to sound high and mighty. That's a fact, or as all advisors probably are. And it's a real bugbear that we can't steer the ship the way we'd like it because we're at the behest of a change of government and a different chancellor.
Yeah, and ironically, you get things like pension simplification, and it's
biggest contradiction in terms of.
Well, yeah, exactly. I wanted to go to about investing when you get to the retirement age, because as you say here, you come to 65. I mean, realistically now, if somebody's born now, they're probably going to live until they're at least 90, maybe even older than that. So realistically speaking, this person's got to have enough money to last them probably 20, 25 years, maybe even 30 years. Yeah. Who knows? What's the strategy? What's your philosophy then in terms of what someone should do? Should they go and get an annuity, or should they?
Okay. Each client, different set of circumstances, different priorities, different needs, different ages, health. There's a whole raft of criteria. But talking generically,
in general, yeah.
Generically, I go back to the mistake that most people make. Most people think that they're invested up to retirement and then they stop. The reason for that is it's got a basis in its reasoning. Not many years ago, but the old school of thinking was you saved up a pot of money and then you went and bought an annuity. You handed your money across to an insurance company that was going to give you the best income for life. You gave it away. You can't get it back once it's given away, and then they're on the hook to provide you an income for the rest of your life. Now, if you break longevity records, you're quids in. If you die the next day, they're quids in. You can add bells and whistles like a low start annuity, which increases with inflation, but it normally takes 15, 17 years for it to break even. So level income, in any way, shape or form, in my opinion, is destitution by design, because inflation does this.
Yep.
If your income's level with an annuity, and most people take level annuities, if it's level, you're taking a pay cut every year, guaranteed. Now, you wouldn't willingly do that, but that is what an annuity is. Most people these days, or a lot of people, go into flexible access drawdown. They want control of the funds, much like a gas stove. They want to be able to turn it up, down, on, off, for their changing needs and requirements, and to leave a legacy to their heirs, because the money would stay under the roof, whereas an annuity is gone forever. So when it comes to retirement, I have to tell people, you're not, and the point I would finish on that is, it would make sense to de-risk if you were going to hand the money over, because you don't want anything silly happening to the markets a month before you're going to hand your money across. If COVID came a month before you were going to hand your money and the market fell 10% or 20%, you haven't got the time to get it back. You're stuffed. So it makes sense. Any savings need that's got a defined amount in time in the future, you need to plan for that accordingly. And that may well mean de-risking and put it into a cash fund or keep it safe. But if you're in it forever, then you're not investing up to retirement. You're investing up to and throughout retirement. So the final point on that is, imagine that your investments did relatively well over your accumulation phase. And let's say when you look at your investments, you say, well, actually, do you know what? It's averaged about a 7% a year return, my investments, over 30 years. It's done really well. And then you willingly and knowingly place your money into an environment which, with the best will in the world, may only make 2 or 3% because you're going more security and giving up the potential for growth. And yet you need to take 3.5%, 4% a year, and inflation's hovering around 3. Well, if you're taking out more than it's got a realistic chance of growing by, you are run the serious risk of everyone's biggest concern, running out of money in retirement. So my philosophy, I'm not talking generically here, is that people should remain invested throughout their lives. That's the only chance you've got of providing a sustainable income that can give you a respectable, dignified and independent retirement.
But then what happens is that over the time and as you get older, you start to de-risk you de-risk a percentage of it, I'm assuming.
Well, one of the old school thoughts was, and a lot of people still like this because it gives them a comfort blanket, is they say, oh, I'm going to put 2 to 3 years of my income requirements in a cash fund within my pension. If the market falls 10, 20%, I'll turn the tap off there, I'll let that recover, and I'll use this safety hub, this 2 or 3 years income to live off until things go on an upward trajectory again. And that gives people a big comfort blanket. A lot of research suggests that if that money had been invested over the long term, it negates the need for doing that. But I understand why people would do it, because it makes them sleep easy at night. So and why 2 or 3 years income? Because historically, bear markets generally don't last as long as that. We have had protracted bear markets, but generally they don't last more than historically 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, 2 years. So by that time, when they go into the reserve fund, hopefully markets have gone on a new trajectory, bull market, when we go on to another high. And that's the reasoning behind that. And the other thing, of course, is we tend to spend less as we get older. If getting on a plane to Vegas was your thing when you were 60, it's unlikely to be when you're 80. Great if it is, I'm all for it, but it's unlikely. I say to clients, more on heating, less on eating. So it's a myth that your money must continue perpetually increase until the day you die, because we generally slow down when the hips and knees and the backs go. There's always the exception of the rule. And the only thing that throws a spanner in the works is if long-term care rears its ugly head and you've got to fund it. But take long-term care away and your living expenses, we tend to spend less because we slow down. So I don't subscribe to the fact that income must perpetually increase until the day we die, because we generally spend less. We eat less, we don't go as far. If getting the latest TV was your thing every 12 months, it probably won't be when you're 80. So there is a bit of a myth. And let's not forget that if you've got 2 full state pensions coming in that are index linked, I mean, you're knocking on the door of £24,000 a year there. That's not a bad underpin, which is index linked. For most average Joes, most people, that will take care of their day-to-day living expenses. And the money you've accrued through final salary pensions, investments or inheritance, well, that's spending money. So, yeah, I don't subscribe that money must continually increase until the day you die. Up to your golden years where you're active and fit and can do the things you want to do, yes. Then it tends to level off and then it tends to slow down.
What, just going on to, you mentioned it very briefly there, long-term care. What, how does, genuinely here, I'm interested, how does somebody plan for that moving forward?
Okay, so there are insurance policies you can take. You can insure for long-term care. Other than that, people basically rely on their own assets, because the local authority will, if you needed long-term care, the local authority reserves the right to look back in your financial affairs indefinitely, and they'll see what assets that you've got. And obviously, we're getting older. In my opinion, it's probably an unsolvable problem. It's not going to go away. The great news is we're all living longer. The bad news is we're all living longer. It brings its own problems. So it's great. It's great if you're living old and you've got your faculties and you can get out and about. It's wonderful. It's a horrible place when you're existing and not living. So if it gets to the point where you're just existing and you've got to shuffle off to an old people's home or a retirement place where you need 24-hour care, that is extremely expensive depending on the level of care. Very expensive. So some people want to keep an eye on holding on to their assets for fear of that, and other people on the other side of the coin go, oh no, over my dead body, I don't want my kids' inheritance going. If I don't know what day it is, I don't care, and I'm going to help my kids get a leg up early doors when I'm fit and healthy. Everybody's different, but the problem will not go away. And I don't think any government can resolve that issue because of longevity and more. The older you live, the reality is the more care you're going to probably need when you get older. So, and it's going to be down to you because you won't get a whole lot out of the state because it's unaffordable.
No, I think I can't remember at the moment what do you get about. I think you get 3 months where I think it might.
You're independently assessed.
You are,
yeah. You're independently assessed. Yeah.
But yeah, for the most part though, and if you got your house, you're gonna have to sell it.
Well, possibly, yeah. Worst case scenario, they'll go after assets that are realisable. Yeah, they're not going to give it away for nothing.
No. Just tell me about the folding piece of paper. I like this story.
All right, yeah. So I've touched on compounding, and I've done this in front of a few universities and schools. So it's just an interesting thing because I didn't really grasp the power of compounding when I was at school. Maybe because I just wasn't paying attention. I don't know, but I don't remember it being taught to me. So the example is I was in front of these kids in school and I said, look, they all had paper on their desk. And I said, get an A4 sheet of paper. I said, now fold it in, just humour me and fold it in half. And they folded it in half, conformity, social compliance. They folded it in half. I said, now fold it in half again. Now, you and I know that you can only fold a piece of paper in half about 7 times before it's physically impossible to fold it again. But I said, look, remove the physics. Assume you can continue to fold that piece of paper in half 50 times. I know you can't physically do it, obviously, but imagine you could keep folding it. How tall do you think that would be in, meters or miles or whatever, if you could fold an A4 sheet of paper in half 50 times? Now, I think you know the answer to this question because we've discussed it. But most people, the answers I get is, oh, well, I don't know, that, or maybe a bit that high. No, every time you fold that piece of paper in half, it's doubling in thickness. Now, I know this is going to sound crazy, but the truth of the matter is, if you could physically fold an A4 sheet of paper in half 50 times, it would reach virtually from Earth to the Sun, which is 93 million miles high. Now, I know you're going to say send for the men in the straitjackets and the white cell, right? But you can go onto Google and find this. It's exponential growth. So to wrap your arms around that, if you could fold it one more time, 51 times, it's doubling. It would go from the sun, from here to the sun and back. Now, I did dumb it down with an example that would be more rational in your head. And the other example is you get an opportunity of a lifetime, and the employer says to you, "Look, I need you to work for 30 days. I'll pay you £1 million, or I'll pay you a penny a day." But I'll double it every day for 30 days.
Do you know what? I genuinely couldn't believe when I was looking at this. I had to sort of go and do the maths on it and go, he's right.
Yeah, right. So if you come in on a Monday, they pay you £1. You come in on Tuesday, they pay you £2. Wednesday, it's £4, and so on. Okay. So quick: 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, £1, 28, 256. Call it a fiver.
Yeah.
10, 20, 40, 80. 160, 320, 640, 1250. If you can fold it, if you could get a penny a day doubled for 30 days, it's for a month, let's say, it's about 10.5 million. That is a penny doubled a day for 30 times. Now, if you imagine doubling that another 20 times, you can then begin to relate the folding of the paper getting from here to the sun, because we've got to over 10 million doubling it. Just 30 times.
Yeah.
And now it's going to be doubled another 20 times from 10 odd million. Now, compounding is crazy. Now, it'd be great if you had client returns like that, of course, But it's understanding the power of compounding over time. Because that's it. Time and compounding is incredible. If you remain invested, you benefit from the compounding. And this is where charges come in, because compound interest can work every bit against you as it can for you. So if you're paying exorbitant charges for your investment without no guarantee of better performance, it's eating away at the money you're investing. Every pound you every pound that you reduce your investment charges by, it's another pound that gets invested at the underlying rate, or another pound in your pocket in income. So fees aren't the be all and end all, but they are extremely important, and ignore them at your peril.
Just going on to the charges with the annual management charges for advisors. What do you think about advisors that have DFM services? And just interested to have your take on it.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan personally. I used to many years ago. you could say I believe the hype. You could say I think a lot of advisors did many years ago, but I turned off from that a long time ago for the simple reason they're not the cheapest. There's no guarantee of outperformance, and a lot of the times they don't hit their own benchmarks. When if you buy, I mean, John Bogle, who founded Vanguard, who died sadly a few years ago, he was the founder of Vanguard. He came out with a great saying many years ago, and most advisors know what it is. Instead of finding the needle in the haystack, just buy the haystack, and that's buying a global low-cost fund. With thousands of the greatest businesses that we discussed in it. You're owning a piece of everything. So, there are always winners and always losers. When COVID came and the market fell, look how well Amazon and Netflix and Uber, all these companies that profited by the predicament that we were in. So there will always be winners as well as losers. Now, if you own thousands and thousands of great businesses, they're not all going to be winners at the same time. They're not all going to be losers at the same time. Some, you could say they're parasites because they just benefit from circumstance. So global diversified and keeping costs low is really important. Fees on everything, but believe me, they're pretty important.
Well, I mean,
so just to finish, beg your pardon.
Yeah, sorry.
On the DFM side, I don't see any evidence of consistent outperformance. Anyone can have a flash in the pan result, but it's my opinion, and the argument will rage on. But my own opinion is, keep costs low, be globally diversified, and let time do its thing, and try to be patient and keep a good temperament. There isn't a lot more you can do. If you can set those up, historically, you've generally had a pretty good outcome.
Well, I'm probably going to upset people with what I say on this, but what you were saying in the book as well was the DFM managers or the fund managers in general, they can only go back 5 years. Really, they can't. You get them showing consistent returns for decades long. It's just not possible.
Look, here's my piece on it. This is why I think the way I think. Okay, right. So we all get the same information, financial information, at the same time from the same source. Let's say it's Bloomberg. So you've got 10 direct discretionary fund managers in the room. They all get the information from the same provider, but they're all going to interpret it differently. So one could say, well, I think we should do this, and then say, well, I don't see where you're getting that from. Surely you've got to do that. Now, they all can't be right, can they? It's called a zero-sum game. For one to win, the others must lose. And I just say, in this fast-moving world now, where information is available to everyone 24 hours a day, I just say, how realistic is it to expect the fund manager, and don't get me wrong, they're trying. Their life and income depends on it. They're trying, don't get me wrong. They've got everyone's interest at heart to try and do the best thing for them, their company, and their clients. Make no mistake about that. All I'm saying is, how realistic is it for them to get the calls right more often than not on the billions of bits of information that are running through 24 hours a day at such a speed? How can you call it on what the right thing to do is? Whereas, keeping it simple, I mean, look, Leonardo da Vinci said, simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. And I subscribe to it. Don't overcomplicate it. Warren Buffett said financial planning is easy, it's simple, but not easy. And he's right. It is relatively simple, but it's not easy for the investor. So it's about doing the most important things consistently and trying to just keep yourself on track. Those are the biggest challenges that investors face.
But no, tell me about the rule of 72.
Right. So basically, they're just some quick wins for clients. There are two mathematical anomalies that people may have heard of, may not have. The rule of 72 simply means that if you divide any number into 72, it tells you how many years it will take to double your money. So if you were getting a 1% interest rate using compound interest, 1 divided by 72 is 72. It would take 72 years to double your money if you were getting a return of 1%. If you were getting 10%, it's 7.2 years. If you were getting 10% a year compounding, you would double your money in 7.2 years. So all it is, it's a very close guide. It's pretty close. And there's one called the rule of 114, and it's the same principle, but how long it takes to triple your money. So you put any figure divide it into 114, and that would tell you how many years it would take, pretty roughly, closely, on how long it would take you to triple your investment. It's just something that you can look at and think, well, if I got a return of X on average, that's how long it would take me to double my money. So that they're just peculiar mathematical anomalies. And when I first found this out, like an idiot, I tried to disprove the theory, but I quickly came to the conclusion, yeah, of course it works every time because it's math, isn't it? So basically, it's just a quick win. Divide any figure into 72 and it takes you how many years to double your money. Divide any figure into 114, it tells you how many years roughly it takes to triple your investment.
The thing is about it is that when I was reading the book, that I had so many, there was so much that I was, it just made me think, oh my God, I need to do this, that, and the other right away, which genuinely was a good thing. Was a good thing for me. I mean, I think that if anybody, this isn't really a podcast that's aimed at the general public. Really, it's more at financial planners. But I think that this needs to be out there for people. But I think the thing that was really great though, and I think it kind of leads nicely, a nice kind of question into your third book really, is just the storytelling. I thought was really good. I really like the quotes in there as well. It was really easy to read as well. I thought that there was just simple things that were put, the analogy with the Terminator, with inflation, you know, things, stories like that. It just really brought it to life really. And it also terrified me as well. So tell me about the book then, Storytelling for Financial Advisors.
Right. So basically, all the years I've done this job, over 30 odd years, I've sort of kept like a mental toolbox, or I've written things down. So I come across an idea, I read something, I hear, and I think that's a really useful bit of information. And it's accumulation of all those 30 odd years in doing this job, thinking, how can I sort of give something back to make maybe, I don't know, young advisors get ahead of the game, or jump on their peers by saying, I need to learn some of this softer stuff. So I think storytelling for financial advisors is what I'm in the middle of writing at the moment, is to try and bring analogies and everyday sort of scenarios to which can resonate with anyone. You don't have to understand money or finance. Like the stories that Andy Hart said, you don't have to be in money or finance to realise that. And when you tell someone a story, they're running a movie in their head. It's going in. They visualise it. They can see it. They can hear it. So when you tell these stories about the roller coaster, you can't now think of a roller coaster, can you? It's in your head. You can't get out your image. If I say don't think about a black cat, you can't stop thinking about a black cat. Yeah. So when we tell stories, they're engaging and they're meaningful and people can relate to them. People don't want to be talking in jargon and charts. It's not inspiring. It bogs people down. It's not really what they're all about. So by engaging storytelling for financial advisors, which I'm in the middle of writing now, I'm collating all the stories and analogies that I've learned and developed myself to put them into a book to say, this will help you explain a narrative to a client on their journey from A to B, and with all the bumps in the road along the way, and how to explain it in real world relatable analogies that anybody can relate to. So that's what I'm enjoying putting together at the moment. It's going to take me a good few months to put it together because I've got an awful lot of source material to go through, and the most difficult process I found for writing books was making sure you're not repeating something and getting it in an order that flows. That's the most difficult thing I've found writing the first two books. So it is about trying to give something back to the profession, and hopefully advisors will buy it and read it and think, I learned something, or that's a clever way of explaining that, and that will make clients' decision making that much easier by resonating with them.
Do you think financial planners maybe don't use this enough on the whole, the storytelling side? I guess you don't maybe you don't.
I wouldn't really know. I think it comes with experience. The longer you're in this game, the more you learn. The minute you think you know it all, you come to realise you know nothing. I read all the time. I listen to books on Audible in the car. I love listening to music, but I steel myself to listen to some really great books, and I'm continually learning, and I'll always do that. I've studied behavioural investment sort of economics for about 16, 17 years. Daniel Kahneman and people like that, and Tversky, I should say, that have written fantastic books that give me really great insights onto what is going on up here and what lies behind the client's decision making. Because as I said, we are emotional animals. We're not logic driven, we're emotionally driven. And that is what makes or breaks investors. It's sticking to the simple things and not falling foul of the mistakes most people make. Hence, 70% of my time is on educating clients and keeping them on the straight and narrow. That's what my job basically is, the bulk of what I do. The rest of it, as I said, is the mundane stuff. So yeah, writing the books and getting the information out there is to get the message out there so people can learn from it and hopefully share that information. I'm passionate about education. probably comes across in this meeting today. At least I hope it does. I am passionate about education, because the better, more educated the public are from an earlier age, the better outcomes they'll have, and it makes life easy for everyone.
I'm just interested to know whether there have been any clients that you maybe haven't been able to win over to this way of thinking. I think you said beforehand that most clients had stayed in, but was there anybody that maybe you tried to make an effort with this and it maybe didn't, I don't know, it didn't land for whatever reason?
No, honestly, hand on heart, I would tell you, if I lost a client, I would honestly tell you, I promise you I would. I didn't have any. So touch wood, it won't happen. I said a few people needed the arm around them, the sit down, the one-to-one. Remember, we said these things can happen. We prepared for it. Remind them of what their plan is, how things are progressing, what their time scale was. They just needed that, tell me everything's going to be all right. That's what they need. Clients need the, please tell me everything's going to be all right, or how can we deal with what we're having to deal with it now? And clients greatly value that. I mean, I think personal contact, constant contact with clients, for me, is vitally important. When COVID came, some advisors might have buried their head in the sand, I don't know. I upped my contact because people were emotionally drained. You're thinking about your own mortality or elderly parents. That's enough to worry with. Then you're worried about, are your pensions performing? So I made a real effort to try and be in constant contact with my clients, saying, look, if you've got a problem, it's an issue, I don't care how small it is or how trivial you think it might be, please let me know. Let's quash it so you can carry on with the more important things until we get through this mess. And that's what I say. I do video blogs to my clients every month. And I just think always being there. And I think you can't put a price on response times. My assistant Sharon and the admin team and myself, we sort of pride ourselves on getting back to clients as quickly as humanly possible. And I mean really quickly. If an email comes in, even if I'm on holiday, I'll answer it. Now you might think, well, that's a stupid thing to do. Old habits die hard. I know clients value it. Oh, I'm sorry, Mike, I didn't know you were on holiday. I said, look, it took 2 minutes over coffee. Don't worry about it. I do believe that it gives reassurance that you're available for your clients. They're paying for us not just to manage their money and their life plan. We're counsellors to a degree. In all honesty, we are. It sounds a bit, wishy-washy, but the truth of it is a lot of advisors are pretty much counsellors. They're trying to manage a lot of emotion up here and what's going on in the client lives unrelated to their finances, which is very important, most important, family. So it's the balancing act, but I'm a firm believer in always be there for your clients and make sure, look, I'm always here. Just soft touch points, but regularly, so they know where's he gone or I can never get hold of him. The minute you start falling into that trap, you're on a slippery slope. I left 3 emails, I left 2 messages. Why aren't you coming back to me? That's not the message you want to send. I want to send my clients a message and think, bloody hell, that was quick. I emailed him 3 minutes ago, he's already come back to me. Because if I'm free and I can respond, I'm going to, or my assistant will. So this may sound incredibly common sense, but I've heard from clients that I've taken on that that's not been their experience. I left 4 emails, I left him 2 messages, I haven't heard from him. I struggle with that. I don't know. You're not going to retain clients. And look, it's a big competition out there. Clients don't have to deal with me. There's hundreds of people that do what I do all over the country, thousands. So try to make a niche or just be consistent. At least be consistent. And I sound like a broken record, but doing the job for over 30 years, you see the good, the bad and the ugly. Are there things I could do better? You bet your life. And I'm always striving to try and do that. We're embracing artificial intelligence. There's a lot of good, there's a lot of bad with artificial intelligence, but we're trying to embrace it into our practice to deal with the mundane that the client doesn't see any value in, but is an important integral part of the job in compliance, because they're paying to be able to speak to me and give advice and listen to their concerns. They're not paying for that. They are they are in a way, but they don't see the value in that. So artificial intelligence, I would say, don't ignore it. It's here today and it's moving at a hell of a rate. So I would say embrace, if you're running your own practice, and advisors, embrace AI. If you're uncomfortable with it, engage with someone who knows more than you and work with it and see what the efficiencies that you can create within your practice to free up the time to do the things we're meant to be doing, and that's listening to clients, working on their plans and keeping them happy.
How many touch points would you say that you should have, roughly speaking?
I can't speak for other clients. I know I've tested my clients and tested the water with them. I send a video blog to my clients every month. Sometimes it's 10 minutes, sometimes it's 5 minutes, sometimes there's lengthy stuff that's come out of the market, that's the changing of the budget and the pension rules and so on, then that might be a bit more lengthy. But I do endeavour to send something at least every month, at least once a month. And then I get the management information from the sources I send it, and I get a high uptake on, I know who's looked at it and how many times they've looked at it. Programs like MailChimp, they give you all this management information. And I just think to be able to know that your clients know that you're always there, it just gives them that warm fuzzy feeling. I am in safe hands. That's me. I can only speak for myself, and it's something I've done for many, many years, and I'm just trying to embellish and polish that to give clients more time and use the artificial intelligence on the back office to deal with the stuff that they're not really that interested in.
What just final question from my side. What advice would you give young financial planners now in terms of the key thing in order to have a good and successful career as a financial planner?
Find a mentor, or link up with people on social media that you aspire to like, or you like. Well, there's a lot of great advice out there. Number one, if you're a financial advisor and you're a young financial advisor, then subscribe to Trap podcast. That's part of Andy Hart and Nick Lincoln and Alan Smith. Yep. And there's 4 of the guys, and they do a fantastic job because they're straight talkers. It's engaging, it's funny, and they deal with the topics of the day. And you could do a lot worse than listening to that. If you're a young advisor, you really need to subscribe to the Trap podcast because it's so informative. Those guys have got decades of experience. They're all very successful in their own fields, and they are very giving in that information, which is a rarity in our profession. And a lot of advisors, been many miles on the clock, still swear by it, and that tells you that they're prepared to learn and listen. So I would say certainly subscribe to the Trap podcast all day long because it's fantastic and it's funny, and it's useful above all else. And I would say read everything that Nick Murray has ever written. Now, getting his books aren't easy because he's in the United States of America. Subscribe to Nick Murray. The return on your investment is astronomical. I've learnt more from Nick Murray than anyone I can possibly think of. Other big mover and shakers in our profession that have done a really great job, and you're worth engaging with their advice and their processes, is Paul Armson, who runs for advisors. Paul Armson, you'll find him on the internet easy enough. Paul's been a real mover and shaker for years in the financial services industry. People like Philip Calvert for marketing, who's another expert in his field, talks internationally. Ian McKenna, high on technology, at the forefront, the cutting edge of everything technology, a mine of information, and the guy's incredible what he knows about technology, and he's always putting himself out there to learn. So read, do some improvement on the softer skills, the behavioural stuff. That will differentiate you, because financial planning for a lot of people can be quite a boring subject, but when you dig under what drives their decision making, you hit a point and a touch point that resonates, and that could get you the difference between getting a client and not. So you've got to listen from the client's point of view. Always try to put yourself in the client's point of view. If I was sat there, what would I be listening to and what would make sense to me? And sometimes it's hard to remember that because we get caught up in the job as we do from day to day. So yeah, the Trap podcast, everything that Nick Murray has ever written, it's gold dust. Ian McKenna, Paul Armson, Phil Calvert. If you make those contacts and you're new to the business, or you're already in the business but you're hitting a glass ceiling, I'm pretty sure you'll be taking your business to the next level by engaging with these highly experienced, very professional and very successful people.
I think the book is fantastic. I love the book.
Thanks.
It's yeah, and I thought it resonated with me a lot, particularly with the stories in there. I like the quotes, and yeah, as I said before, the storytelling was just fantastic. And the thing was, it was good for reference points as well, because then normally you wouldn't be able to remember everything, but then you remember the story and you think to yourself, oh, do you know what? If you folded a piece of paper 50 times, whatever, you get to the sun. I'm going to remember that, aren't I? It's something, and I think that was really powerful. So yeah, I really did like that. And personally, I probably think that most financial planners probably don't do it enough, I suspect.
Maybe not. Like I said, I can only speak for works for me. The final thing I would say, apart from all those eminent guys that are leaders in our profession, is I also read a lot about the Stoics. Greek and Roman philosophers, because
That comes across in the book as
well,
well.
it's so timeless. Those lessons from those titans throughout history, they still resonate even with finance. Believe it or not, you can buy a book on the great Stoic quotes, Marco Aurelius and Seneca and all these people, and it might sound boring, yawning type of stuff, but if you were serious about taking your business to the next level, you want to just dip your toe into this type of stuff, because you no doubt you will read some of it and think that's as true today as it was hundreds and thousands of years ago. So I am interested in reading about the Stoics, and it also can make you a better investor, because it instills that control what's within your power and try to let go of everything that's out of your control.
Thank you to Mike LeGassick for joining me today. I had a really great chat with him. Took so much from it. What I would say is, if you're interested in this, go and buy his book. I would really recommend it. Whether you're a financial planner or anybody else, it is a great read. I love the stories in there. It's Mind Over Markets. You can get it on Amazon. And if you like this this podcast, then like it, share it, go and make a comment on LinkedIn, whatever. Make a comment. I'd really appreciate it. Thank you for listening.